right. We are live. So, little scheduling conflict in my attempts to actually avoid the people on Friday that normally live stream within our community, like Caleb and Matt. I actually landed right on one of their times. So, my mistake on that. Again, I'll keep this pretty short. There's probably not a whole lot of overlap, but I do know some of you. I've seen some of you in Caleb's streams before because I watch them myself sometimes. So hopefully we will be quick. And again, these are all recorded, so you can always watch mine or his later, whichever one's more interesting to you today. So what I wanted to do was kind of recap the mess in which we left things yesterday in yesterday's live stream. So for those that are joining, just let me know you can see and hear me okay, see the screen, see my little rounded head in the corner. All right, yeah, let's check this out. So yesterday, the issue was basically that we needed to know some information about the enum columns, and just to kind of look at some references, MySQL, Doctrine, Enum. There was actually a support section that I took a look at that actually talked about, setting up the enum types. But what was really interesting is that I found out that these effectively didn't really map one-to-one. They weren't really dynamic. Like, they didn't support any enum. A lot of the times people were just saying, enum of a very certain type, like gender or visibility, on or off kind of stuff. So they made very, very specific enum types, and then they used these annotations that I guess Doctrine reads. And when you had this set up, everything works. But of course, I can't expect Laravel projects or projects that use Blueprint to kind of have this definition, because we're generating code from scratch first and foremost. But second of all, not everybody necessarily writes this type of documentation, because Laravel abstracts that for us. Let me check my settings here. I feel like maybe stuff's not right. Built-in microphone. That's definitely not right. No wonder y'all are not responding to me. Helps when you probably have the actual input correct. There.
That's better. So I probably sound significantly better now. Sorry about that, folks. Let me know you can hear me a lot better now in the chat if you don't mind. Yeah, the intro is just kind of chit-chat anyway, so no big deal. But basically, long story short, these enums bits, this type thing alone doesn't really get us to where we need to go. So even though this class is helpful and is what they recommend in their docs, I just wasn't having much luck with it for the purposes of Blueprint. So what I did was I registered this type, and we saw this yesterday. We need to kind of clean that up. But what I ended up doing was I registered this type, and then before I returned the columns, there was a little echo. Now it's gone. Good, yeah, that was definitely the iMac mic. I thought it was weird that I wasn't. Sometimes I'll kind of hear myself in here when I'm popping, which is good. I can know to kind of slow it down, but I wasn't getting any of that, so I figured. And then I realized I wasn't even plugged in, so there we go. All fixed now. Anyway, these list table columns, all this is Doctrine stuff, and it worked great. But as we saw yesterday, really low level in Doctrine, it reads kind of the definition of the enum type. So for example, if we just go to like my PHP admin, and we'll jump into base Laravel, and we'll just kind of look at the structure of this. Oh wait, we wanted Turbo Zonda is what we want. I always forget which sample project I'm messing with. So if we look at this structure, it would actually give us this definition, this enum, SMS, email, push, and this is all just generic. And I actually made some more for testing yesterday to test some more complex values that are quoted and whatnot. So low-level Doctrine actually knows that definition, that type, but it doesn't actually inject that into the column, which is really, really annoying because they have all the information they need. And to Adrian's point yesterday, this PR that he was working on, in order to get that, data, you actually have to override like the managers. Even though the type should have the SQL declaration, that's the generated declaration, not the one that comes from reading the table list. And it's just really, really dense. And more things than just MySQL support enums, so Postgres does, for example. So you would effectively, in Blueprint, I would have to rewrite all of these managers or extend all of these managers to do this extra special little one-liner thing that really, again, Doctrine already has low level. So it's really, really annoying. Um, so I tried to look for the lightest weight thing because I don't want to go and, I don't want Blueprint to be like this Doctrine override. And clearly, a lot of people have tried to put enum into Doctrine, and it just they don't seem to want it or something. I don't know. Again, I don't want to put any words in anyone's mouths, but yeah, it seems like the point is that a lot of people have tried. And so either I don't understand the easier way to do it in Doctrine, or again, it's just not like a first class kind of thing problem. So anyways, here's what I did. I loop over the collection, the columns that come back, and I see if they contain an instance of this enum type that we registered when Doctrine is attempting to map the types. Otherwise, it throws the error, which is the original issue that we have in Blueprint. So if it uses enums, then I effectively parse that definition that we saw from that before, and then I loop over it to filter them down to just the enum columns again, pull out of that definition that exact field type, and again, I'm going to need to clean this up because that field name and stuff actually gets corrected in the manager. So again, there's some to-do steps here. So, to-do refine for all platforms. And then effectively, I extract those options in the enum type that we built. And I just made this nice little static method. And again, a lot of those code actually came from just kind of cherry picked out of Adrian's PR where they were doing, some stuff down here. Now I can't use string of because Blueprint still supports Laravel 6. So I just kind of trim that down into some old school PHP native methods for replace and explode, and then I trim off the quotes and stuff that SQL puts around it. Now, this was the last final part that actually ended up being a little bit tricky. This works. So if we go back, let's just demonstrate this. So I'm back in that Turbo Zonda, and I'll run trace, and we shouldn't see any errors or any crazy debugging from yesterday. Instead, we get what we want. Let's go to the right screen. If we go to Blueprint, we'll see that this actually parses the enum with those values now. And in fact, it even is good enough to handle things with spaces and whatnot based on some of that fudging we did. Where it gets weird, and this isn't necessarily a common practice, but it's kind of a cool thing in Blueprint, and also one of the reasons I went forward with building something like the trace command. Not only does the trace command help you reference existing models in your existing applications so you can use Blueprint effectively in your existing applications without having to redefine models and so forth. You can reference them, and it uses this content to figure all that out. But a really cool edge case or boundary case that you can actually use this for is I see a lot of applications that, Laravel applications, even Shift, for example, that has been around for years, and it has a crazy amount of migrations. Well, with Trace, you could actually take this, all your models section, and dump it into your draft file, and when you run build, and we'll see part of the error here, but when you run build, it'll actually rebuild your complete migrations again, all in individual things. So instead of all the alter tables and this and that, you can actually collapse them down. This is important if you have testing build processes, for example, because if you have 400 migrations but only 20 models, that's really going to eat up a lot of time versus just being able to pack those back down. Now, I do think in Laravel 8 there is a new schema SQL file that you can generate as well with a command, which is awesome. That's something that's been around in Rails for years, and I've kind of poked about every now and then, so I think that's going to be something very similar that can help and probably better catered to that need. But a cool little boundary case that you can actually use Blueprint 4 to regenerate your migrations for a very large project, so you just have them all packed down again. Okay, getting back to the point though, the issue is that when we generate this, for example, so I just kind of pack this back down into normal draft syntax, and let me regenerate these as well. Now we won't get an error, but notice that I cleaned these up just a little bit. I cleaned them up with some extra quotes that actually shouldn't be there. Let's run this one last time. And when we go and look at this most recent thing, we'll see that we're getting a little bit of extra scrubbing there. Now this is actually another issue that's in Blueprint, so we're actually going to get a 2-for-1 special here. So in the documentation thing, they were saying sometimes there's quotation marks for enums and sometimes there's not. So what I looked for, and this goes back in a previous live stream where we talked about the fail and so forth inside of Blueprint, we actually allow quoted values when you have spaces. So this is actually correct in the draft YAML, but the problem is the migration generator should actually trim those off with the understanding that they get JSON encoded correctly. So that's the last final bit that needs to be fixed here for all this to work. So just a quick recap on everything. Long story short here is we register the type as the documentation says for enums, but that doesn't really get us far enough because it doesn't allow us to dynamically pull out the values for any old enum column, right? It'll work if we register very specific enum types per the Doctrine documentation, but not just a generic one to be able to know its values. There might be a better way to do that, but what I basically did was I flagged those as enum types. I determine if we are using any, and then I reread the definition manually, which is all the work that this list table columns does for me underneath. But because that method has access to the data definition or the column definition, which is that little fancy string right there of the enum and the types where we can do that regex on it, I have to get that myself. So I read it out in all the definitions for that table, I filter through it again for the enum types, and then I take that and extract the options and piggyback it on a public property, inject a public property, thank you, PHP, into that particular column, and then ultimately when I return columns, it's going to have that later down the line where I'm able to now say, solve this little to-do here, I can drop off enums, and I add this instead, and basically say, hey, if type's enum and you don't have empty options, then tack on those options the way Blueprint expects you to do the little syntax, which is this part here. Well, not the nullable, that part there. So that's the solution. Seems to work, minus the fact that even though this is quoted correctly in the draft file, it actually gets double encoded with the JSON encode that's being used in the migration generator. So I'm going to wrap all that up into a PR. Again, I know I'm potentially conflicting with some other live streamers. I'll leave it up to the chat if you want me to stay live and keep going to demonstrate the rest of those pieces. Again, no problem to jump off and watch the other streams. I know I kind of conflicted with that schedule despite my efforts not to. So feel free to shoot me any questions or whatnot in the chat. Like I said, that's pretty much the main gist, but I might keep going to try to take this code that I munged together in Atom here by messing around in the vendor folder and actually open up that PR if people are interested in sticking around. So I will progress forward that way. But yeah, let me know in the chat what you think, and let's go to Blueprint. And we'll pull everything down, make sure we got the latest. Oh yeah, there was a automatic PR from Travis CI. Or no, Style CI. Okay, cool. So let's do a git checkout -b support enums, or enum support. I like that better. Enum support. And let's open PHP Storm, and let's actually kill Docker, just because we don't really need to be in there anymore. That should chunk things up a sec. Alright, where are we? Cool. Yeah, we still got a few viewers, so I'll just keep hacking along here. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back to PHP Storm, and let's get into this trace command, and we'll just start bringing across what we have. Oh yeah, look, there's that little skip fail thing that handles quoted values like we talked about. So all this Lexington stuff is right. It's actually the generator that's wrong. And yeah, I was already kind of looking at it here. It's this line here. So let's put a little to do. It's not that it's wrong, it's just that it doesn't gracefully handle double quoted values, and that's actually something that we'll need to support. So, revisit encoding. So we'll make sure to come back to that. Okay, but let's start with the trace command, and let's bring this back to life. Quiet bunch today. I couldn't get away from the chats yesterday, and now it's nothing. All right. So let's take this a little bit. You know, thinking back on this cleanup, I don't know if there's an opportunity to clean this up or not, because that would require us to get all this DB connection stuff elsewhere. I don't know. It's not like we're newing up a connection here. Like Laravel has this underneath the covers, so we're really just accessing it. So it's not, while it's not pretty, everything related to Doctrine is self-contained within this method. So I just don't think we can register this mapping anywhere else without starting to really like crazily inject stuff. So with that said, I don't think there's a cleanup opportunity there is the point. So let's bring in these classes. So we've got a Doctrine deval type, and we're going to add type. What is it not like? Oh, unhandled exception. That's okay. And then, okay, so we don't have our own enum type, so we're going to need to add that to here as well. So where do I want to put that? I guess just top level is probably still fine. I mean, it's not awesome, but I've got some file mix-ins and other junk up there, so I'm okay with that, I think. So let's do this. Let's just make a new PHP file, and we'll say enum type is what we called it. And we'll stack that down here. Let's format everything. And yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, see, none of this actually ends up working. Name, yeah, that's weird. Invalid name. This should probably be get name. Yeah, okay, good enough, even though those are never called. Let's do it right. Okay, so we're going to add the enum type only if it doesn't have an enum type. So this is actually going to, if Doctrine ever did support it, the enum type directly, then we would assume that, you know, maybe it would work. Although we should probably, no, we're going to have to do it this way. If Doctrine ever has an enum type, we're going to have to revisit this, so this code will break, which I'm okay with. All right, next piece is, we can close that. The next piece is all this uses enum stuff. So let's revisit this and bring it across. So we get our tables, and now we're going to loop over the tables to see if it has anything that's a type of blueprint enum type. And if it is, then we know that this table, this model, has enums that it uses. And we're going to need to do some more stuff with them. So that more stuff means filter them again just to the enum types, get a reference to that column so we can actually change it, and then use the definition list that we got. We don't do anything with enums here, so we can get rid of that. And refine for all platforms, yes. This field type, that field type actually gets normalized. So let's go take a look at that to kind of demonstrate what happens there. It actually happens in list table column types, pretty deep down here in this portable definition. Even lower. In portable column definition, And even lower than that, yeah, the key name. They do an str2 lower, but they normalize it. Where do they normalize it? It's actually higher up. I lied. Where do they do that? I saw something in one of these bits where they do like an array key case or something. Array key case, array change case. I think it's in the MySQL manager. Let's see if I can find that. MySQL schema. Where are you? MySQL schema manager. Here we go. Yeah, that's what I was after. Array change key case to lower. Because, see, let's look at Postgres real quick. Yeah, see, they're doing the same thing, but not everything. See, what I'm worried about is that Postgres doesn't call it like field or doesn't have this information in the same thing. Like they should, they're type, but again, I don't know. Like even if we go look at like SQL Server schema, like does it do similar stuff? That's kind of all the part I don't know. Like they do have type here, which seems good. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's gonna work out as well. Do they have field? Field? See, there's no field in here. So they probably call it something else in SQL Server. Yeah, they call it name, it looks like. So, you know, here starts to be kind of part of that problem where I don't know if this is going to be cross-platform. Like I know that's going to work for MySQL. Let's look at Postgres one more time. Do they have a field? So they seem to have a field in here as well. Yeah, so that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. List, it's only possible in MySQL to read the enum definition. It's only possible in MySQL to read the enum definition. Why is that? It doesn't read in Postgres? Doctrine doesn't read it out? I would have assumed it did in type. But yeah, that's fair. I mean, MySQL is really kind of the main one still used. I mean, I want to support as many as possible, but I think I'm hitting a good amount on as long as I'm at least supporting MySQL. Okay, so we'll take that out then, and I'll just comment on the PR that we want to make sure that this, you know, it's potentially going to need to support or be tested on other things. I can always spin up a little Doctrine Postgres to check it out. Okay, so that's good, and then now we're going to extract those options, which this is fine to leave ugly because I want to test drive that properly. So I think this is okay. I think the last piece is down here just to add that little else if. Try to get the column definitions in SQLite and you'll see what I mean. Okay, yeah, sounds good. I'll test those up a little bit later. So, all right, let's leave the to-do the goods and let's drop this enum type. And yeah, so basically if somehow we couldn't read the options for whatever reason, it's just going to bypass this anyways. We'll still have it be, you know, type of enum and it should be fine. So it's just a text field with a constraint. Oh, okay, I gotcha. So SQLite and potentially other things don't necessarily truly support enums, so they have a different definition for it. I gotcha. It'd still be good if Blueprint could read those out. So again, might be something I revisit in the future, but I'll let somebody open a ticket for that. Okay, so type, oh yeah, the translations. I think I added, yes I did, an enum type down here, because that's why we were always just getting string, is because if it didn't have a mapping, it wouldn't do anything else. So I do think this might be test driven, so we'll kind of see, but A, B, C, D, E, F, G, so there's enum, all good. And yeah, so type will still work, it'll still just be enum on its own. even when there aren't any column options. So at the very least, Blueprint will output a trace that recognizes that as an enum, but it wouldn't get the options. So that's okay. All right, cool. What's next? I think we've got everything we need out of this. Okay, cool. So Blueprint's not necessary. This was all just for testing. So I think we can close down Atom. And let's do this. Let's go ahead. We should have everything we need. So let's make a commit. Let's push this up so I have access to the enum support branch, and then we'll go back to Turbo Zonda and load that Blueprint version, and we'll just kind of test it live. And then I'll backfill some unit tests once we kind of prove that's working the way we want. And of course, test drive out that generation bit. So let's do a get status here. And we'll do a get add -p, and we'll just kind of review this stuff. So we bring in the types we needed. We register our type. That makes sense. Nice little streamline there, I guess, from the IDE. Awesome, thank you. And then we use enum types. That's the code we brought over, so that looks good. And then what else do we have? We've got this little else if, we just talked about that, and we remove the to-do for enums because we now support them theoretically. I do want to revisit the encoding. I'm not going to add that to the commit though, and then we do need to add the source enum type. So let's do a git commit -m register custom type to support enum. Let's be specific. MySQL enums. Again, we might get lucky that other things support it, but let's push this up. And crap, I'll need Docker back, darn it. All right, bear with me here. It might take off for a second. All right, cool. Let's see here. Everything's good there. So let's check out Docker container, PS. Oops, still booting up. Yes, it is. All right, so while we're waiting on that, let's open up our enum support. So we should have this branch out here, and we should be able to composer require dev enum support and be able to run the same stuff we were just running without it breaking. And if that's true, then we'll come back and we'll fill in these tests that we're missing. The unit tests for kind of the specific things. I actually don't have a test for the trace command. The commands are actually kind of like a hard thing to test. Not necessarily hard in Laravel, but they're kind of hard when you're dealing with like a package because they're not necessarily registered. So Orchestral does make that a little easier. I just kind of need to revisit it. But the point there being that I actually don't have a test for those things just yet, which I need to. Okay, so let's do docker exec, get into this guy with the bash, and we'll go to Turbo Zonda, and we'll do, I think I have already like a dev master, no. So let's do, what is it, composer inst or require, --dev, Laravel shift blueprint, dev enum support. Let's see if it pulls that down. And I brought this up just to see. This is A228B. Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was afraid of. I always forget if that's a composer thing. I always forget, like, if composer doesn't have it registered yet, you might have to like change it directly in. Let's do composer JSON. Yeah, I think sometimes if composer like is a little bit, especially on branches, it can be a little bit behind. So let's change this to dev enum support. And let's try to do a composer update. Let's see what happens. I thought branches had to be referenced with dev in front of them. But that was weird because it just had master. in there instead of dev master, and it worked. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I'm still running, I think I'm still running an early version of Composer. I don't know. Maybe that's new in Composer 2.0, and maybe I'm running 2.0 and don't know yet. Not sure. We'll find out. All right. I should like bring up Caleb's live stream so we we can watch it in the downtime while Composer's running. Okay, good. Yeah, dev enum support. This package has modified files. Oh yes, of course, because we were messing with stuff ourselves. So let's discard those changes. But yes, A28BE, that is ours. So again, I think Composer just hadn't updated their registry yet with that, so we can do it ourselves. I've seen that happen before. I'm sure if we ran this command now, it would be fine, but let's let it finish up. And then with any luck, we should be able to just run trace. Oh, I restarted Docker, so I lost my history. PHP artisan blueprint. Is it blueprint? Yeah, blueprint. Trace. Traced 5 models. Oh, cat.blueprint. Enum SMS email push testing enum1 Jason McCreary O'Brien. Okay, so here's the kicker. What I want to determine is I'm trying to think of how I can like kind of quickly test this. I need to determine if it's appropriate for me to output Jason McCreary with the quotes in this .blueprint file. We know it's important in the draft file, but this gets output kind of in a different way, and then it's read out by Blueprint. So I think, I'm just trying to think of a quick way we can test that when I read these model traces, or when I read the models that have been traced out from the .blueprint file, that it is pulling in that model, it's lexing that model correctly. And again, it should be, because otherwise the lexer would explode. But sometimes when it reads those attributes, it kind of silently plays on, and then you don't know it until the attributes, you read the values. So let's tinker with that real fast. Let's just bring Adam back up again. And where can we go? We can go down in the bowels of Blueprint again, and we can look at the model lexer. And in here, it reads the cached models. So what I would want to do is I would kind of just want to dump this. I think this is just going to be the fastest, nastiest way to do it. And we'll dump the cache. So let's do that. And let's go back to Docker, and we'll run build, and we should see a dump and be able to tell, is this an acceptable output for those models? So here we go. Okay, so type, enum, SMS, email, push. Those are fine. Those don't have anything weird in it. But look at that. Testing with the space doesn't work out here. So let's test this one more time. We'll actually hack the blueprint file to, or the trace file, to see if this cleans up a little better. So this is actually quoted now. That's weird. How did that get quoted now? Oh, I bet you, because we ran build, of course. It rebuilt the messages table correctly. So let's actually just run build again, and it's just going to kind of keep rebuilding it. But the point is if this time we see the right, yeah, we do now. Okay, so that proves actually that when Blueprint put the trace file back in there, that's kind of a lot of messy noise here. Let me just cat that out one more time. So when Blueprint puts it out with quotes is the point, okay? That is actually an acceptable format. What that means is we need to test drive our enum type options parser that if you have a space, we got to wrap you up in double quotes. And then on the flip side, we have to make sure that we're outputting it correctly when we generate the migration. And I think that's going to be the final step to support enums, at least initially. For some reason I can't scroll up. So let's just look at that. Or no, I think we're good. I think we're good here. Let's go back and we'll drive that out properly now. So let's get into our tests. And this is just going to be a little unit test. And it'll just be top level. So we'll just say copy paste just for giggles. And this will be our enum type test. And this will be our enum type test. And I'm missing my little fun covers here, so let's put that in. So covers, blueprint, enum type. And let's just bring that up side by side. And what we basically want to do is we want to test drive that if there's any kind of space, we need to double quote it effectively. So we're going to test drive these uncommented, or we're going to test drive it to where we uncomment those commented lines. Okay, so let's say something like, we'll just do a data provider here. I think that's going to be the easiest thing ever. So we'll just say enum options data provider. And let's generate that. And it's an array of arrays. And let's just get some fun little things here. So what we're going to expect, or what we're going to send in is going to be enum. And we'll send in one, or well, these are actually going to be double quoted. So normally the way these come back is 1, 2, whoops, 2, and 3. And then our expectation of these values would be 1, 2, 3. That's what we would get back in the options. And then let's get a little more advanced. So we'll do something like 1, 2, 3. Not that this should matter, but just for more giggles. And then here, let's do something more like, something with the spaces. So we'll do John Doe, and we'll do Conan O'Brien, which I think will be quoted like that. Is it? I think that's right. I don't know. Who knows? It's okay. And then one more with maybe, I don't know, a couple spaces or something. I wonder if you could do something with a quote in it. That would be weird. We'll shy away from that in just a second. So let's start this up with something like spaces and names. Cool. Spaces and quotes. How about quoted names? There we go. That's what I'm after. And so this one should just be one, or well, it'll be the PHP string of 1, 2, 3. And then here's where it's going to get a little bit different. This should be quoted of these. Whoops. Let's just take that. And let's get these right. So let's shut that down for a second. So this should actually get quoted with that. And this should also be quoted with that. And then this one's going to be a little bit different. It will be quoted, but it won't have the double. So we actually take that off. And we'll need to escape it so PHP's happy. Cool. And you know what? Let's just demo. Let's actually demo a quoted name because that made me think. If you just have O'Brien, or we'll say something like O'Doul, this actually shouldn't be double quoted. This should just be O'Doul. Properly PHPified there. All right, cool. Okay. Yeah, let's run this. Well, let's finish our test and let's run this. So we just have this top test. Let's get rid of this other one. That's what you get for copy pasting. And then let's set this up right. So really all we're going to need to do here is just straight up call the enum type. So we should get the definition and then expected, and it helps if I spell definition right, definition. And really all we're going to do is just say this assert equals, equals the expected value with blueprint, enum type, extract options, and then send in the definition. And that's how simple a unit test is. So again, not super integration-y, obviously, but this is helpful in the fact that I can send in a bunch of quick data. This is the epitome of a unit test, which I think is going to be helpful here. So let's actually get out of Docker, and let's do vendor bin php unit. We'll just let them all run real quick. And of course, we have some exceptions. Exec. Oh, well, that's the wrong name, first of all. So let's say something like parse options or extract options. It returns options for enum definitions, or options for enum. There we go. All right, and let's limit ourselves to this so we don't have to watch all of those run. Okay, illegal string offset type. What's going on here? I'm gonna close down the chat for a second so I get full screen. Illegal offset type. Oh, okay, fair enough. This actually comes across in type, which is a little bit ugly. I really shouldn't have to know that type's that way, so I am gonna drive this out a little bit different. So let's just cut that off and see if we pass. Okay, good, we're a little farther, not all the way, and our quoted values are missing quotes, which makes sense. So let's clean that up. Okay, so what we should do is basically be able to uncomment these lines. So if we're never going to get there, so we need to uncomment this. So we're basically saying if there's no kinds of space in the raw value, then we just return it. Otherwise, we want to wrap it in quotes. So let's see how this does. Okay, so we're a little off on John Doe. What is wrong there? John Doe, we're expecting it to be quoted, but they actually have a tiny little space there. Did I introduce some kind of weird character here? Doesn't seem like it. John Doe. So we expected it, but we're getting it quoted. There's a quote within John Doe. That is strange. What did we mess up here? Huh. Well, let's see what's going on. When in doubt, dump it out. So we shouldn't have any space, so let's dump the raw value here. Let's see what's up. Yeah, see, look at that. It's got a little itty bitty space in there. Oh. That's my fault. That actually is an invalid enum definition. I spaced them kind of like I was coding, but these are actually tight together with no spaces. That space was coming from me. There we go, we're all green again. And before we forget, we actually need to go where we're messing with this trace command, and we need to properly send in the type definition there. Okay, so again, these fields and types, they're fine for MySQL. They might not be fine on other things, so we're just going to have to wait until that works out or not. So the last thing we need to do is properly drive a test for seeing that migration. We need to generate that migration bit. So here's migration generator. Here we go, this to do. We need to properly output these values. So what would make sense is to just make a draft file with enum types, and we can take the one we've been using all along for these tests and drive that out in the migration generator. So let's do that. So let's get into our fixtures, our draft files, whoops, and let's make one, we'll just make a new YAML file for enum options. We'll just say enum, or it looks like we've been using dashes, options.yaml. And let's go steal this one we've been using here. We'll clean it up the right way. So this should be models, and then we've got this type and long text, and we actually don't even need these other ones. Let's just get rid of it, and let's just call this, you know, name or something. And let's get rid of those quotes because we don't use them in our stuff, but we do want to use them. So let's format this. Oh, that didn't work. So let's format it. There we go. Okay, so we got an enum of SMS, email, and push. That's good. And then one JSON query. We shouldn't need to do any of this, I don't think. And then 4, and then nullable. So let's kind of see what the migration generator does when we plug this in to the test. And speaking of which, let's go actually make a enum options migration. All right, so this is going to be wrong, but that's okay for now. We'll just get it close. So we'll say create messages table. All right. And then the migration generator test, we'll just go down to our model tree provider, and we'll add yet another test case to it, nice and easy. So enum options is what we called that. It should create the messages table, and that's going to be the enum options migration output that we just did. So again, we expect this to fail for a couple different reasons, but let's watch it fail. Okay, good. So here's our schema that should have been output or generated. So let's drop that in here. And the SMS stuff is fine with me, but the problem here is this JSON query bit with the space and double quoting. That's actually not what we want. Although this would run and pass, it's not right. So now we're actually going to drive out what we know to be wrong now that we kind of have our test. So I kind of worked a little backwards there. I do that sometimes with testing. You know, when you already know your test suite, you know, there's no reason to really, in my opinion, like just painfully drive it out at the nanosecond. You know, you can kind of take a few shortcuts and backfill it. So again, as long as you're working kind of disciplined and incrementally, I think that's okay if you're familiar with testing and again have an extensive test suite. Definitely not in the beginning. We've seen me do that before in the very beginning, and it kind of backfires on you. So okay, so we have a good failure now. This is the failure we want. It's outputting the double quotes, but we really don't want it to do that anymore. So now we should be able to test drive our solution, which is here. So we don't just want to JSON encode it straight up, because the way this is working is PHP is actually double quoting those appropriately because it's a string that is wrapped in a double quote. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering, should the attributes be smart enough or should the migration? I'm trying to determine where this should actually happen. Should the lexer actually chew that out? I'm starting to feel like the lexer should chop the quotes, the surrounding quotes anyways, because it's part of the blueprint syntax. It's not really what you meant to be your attribute value. See, at this point in time, that column attribute should be representative of what the raw values you want it to be, and JSON encode should just work. So I'm kind of starting to think it should go in the lexer. Let's see what that would look like. The only reason it might be a little bit, the only reason it might be a little bit awkward to put in the lexer, well, we are building columns. Yeah, we preg split it on double quotes only, the definition. So it chunks things out based on their quoted values, and then it explodes on the colon. We saw this kind of working before. I tell you what, here's what I'm going to do. We've already driven it out for the migration generator, and this is really the only place where these attributes currently are being used, but I could definitely see where Blueprint down the road takes those enum options and again like maybe generates a select dropdown or something if someone built like a view add-on or a view generator or something. So again, I think it needs to be in the Lexer, but to just kind of finish up this stream, let's clean it up here, just kind of a naive way. So what we're going to do is we will just array map function attribute, and let's pass in column, not column definition, let's pass in column attributes, and this will be attributes or options maybe. Options, I think, is the word we've been using. Wow, I kept typing double P's forever. And let's do options. And what we'll do here is we'll return a trim on attribute. Let's fix that, attribute. All right, and let's trim out anything that's wrapped in quotes. And let's see where this gets us. And we're green. Awesome. Okay, so again, the simplest solution is to put it in the generator, but I don't think that's the most universal solution. But to tidy this up, let's just go ahead and finish this up. So that should definitely be in there from before. We cleaned this up. That's good. And then we remapped the options where we wanted to, added some test cases. Don't think we have, oh, we do have some new files. So let's add tests. Basically all the test stuff gets added. And just for good measure, let's run all those tests again. Clean. And I am just going to append. And nobody look, I'm force pushing. It's my branch. I can do what I want. Plus we had some nasty code that we were just testing live anyway. So, okay, let's open this up and we'll call it a day. So it definitely went a little longer than I wanted there, but you know, again, for future viewers so they can see the full solution. Okay, so what do we have here? Oh, it already applied some style fixes. Interesting. Thank you for that. Okay, cool. So we have, let's just take this one. This is fine. Yeah. So this adds enum support when tracing or when running the trace command on existing models which use or have or define, I think is the right word, define a column of type enum. Cool. We probably don't need to say, we'll just say enum support there. Note, this has currently only been tested on my SQL. Yeah, while other platforms are, let's just say RDBMS, this may support the enum type. This is currently only tested, yeah, on MySQL. I already wrote all that. Okay, cool. And then we'll say fixes. What was that? Not that. This should fix this deval exception on 218. Fixes number 218. Awesome. Let's create that pull request. And we'll make sure everything passes, which is running. And again, I may go ahead and merge this, but then revisit moving it to the Lexer. It's really 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other, but this, regardless, this solves the problem of the issue. But if future people want to read out the enum options, it would be a lot better if the model had, the true value and not necessarily um, kind of fudged later on. So I'll probably clean up that fixture to be the other way around, but I'll do that off stream since we've already kind of gone longer. Again, appreciate you all watching this live and following up. We had, definitely wanted to revisit what happened yesterday. We kind of got stuck in no man's land. It definitely, in the moment, it might have been a little jarring, but I appreciate everyone's feedback and so forth during to kind of help guide me through. I went back and looked at all those resources everyone shared. And again, we found this way through. So it's a solution, not the solution. Maybe Doctrine someday will support enum types in a better, more universal fashion, where we can just get those options back in the column definition from Doctrine directly instead of kind of having to fudge it and rebuild it ourselves. Because it's definitely not pretty, but it does work. So I'll finish this up, get it merged, get it tagged. You'll see the tag announced on Twitter. And hopefully we'll go back to the regular schedule, not to interfere with anyone else next week. So again, thank you all, and see you then.